Another scorching day, busting my ass out in the fields. I carefully planted the last seed and glanced up at the blazing sun. Back in my old life, I'd worked my tail off to get into agricultural and biological college. My parents hated my choice and couldn't understand why I was so into it. Still, in this life, I look back on those memories fondly. After all, Mom had no clue her daughter was going to spark a total farming revolution in another world. Not long ago, my life was all fancy balls and high society. I was always surrounded by people in elegant dresses and suits, clueless about hard work. Right in the middle of that whole ritzy scene, my beloved man was staring right at me. That day totally rocked my world, because he announced he wanted to call off the engagement. She couldn't believe what was happening. Just a second ago, she was making coffee in her kitchen before the explosion. The second she tried to remember the last moments of her old life, a massive headache hit her. Her fiancé coldly said she was faking it to look good. But nobody was buying it. Lena stared in shock at the weirdo making fun of her. Guess it finally clicked that he was Crown Prince David. The guy was clueless about what was wrong with her and said he was sick of her act. Lena froze when he said he'd only agreed to the engagement because his dad ordered him to. In that instant, it hit her. She was inside that novel she'd been reading in her past life. The girl standing next to him was Kang Sena, the main character from another world. And she was stuck in the body of Liena, the typical villain. Jealous of the heroine's charm and success. That was Liena Pond, the girl who fought tooth and nail for her fiancé's attention and affection. In that moment, it struck her how calmly she could recall both of her lives. She was absolutely pissed that she'd gotten stuck playing the villainess who gets exiled from society. She tried to calm down, realizing that something here was different from the usual story. She was being judged for how she treated Saina, even though she hadn't even called her out for her lack of manners. Even though Saina wasn't David's official fiancé, she'd managed to solidify her position. That's exactly why she was so furious about how easily her fiancé decided to break off their engagement in front of everyone. Today was her 20th birthday, the day he was supposed to propose. Instead, he decided to humiliate her publicly. Lena realized that, because of her social standing, there was nothing she could do now. She ran back to her dad's estate, scared out of her mind, and he was ready to tear her a new one for the shame. Lena just stared blankly at the old man, not getting why she had to go through this crap. In the original story, Lena fought her dad's wishes and ended up getting kicked to the curb, which was a total disaster because everything in this world costs a fortune. Regular folks had to go to shamans because they couldn't afford a real doctor. Knowing what was coming, Lena had no clue how her life was going to play out. So, the girl decided to change her dad's mind and dropped to her knees, begging. She pleaded with him not to ditch her, promising she'd be good from now on. Her stern dad was totally thrown off by hearing his daughter talk like that. He gave her this fake nice smile, then ordered the guards to toss her out of the palace. Lena didn't even have time to blink before she was thrown out the palace gates. Tasting the bitterness of defeat, she smirked at how she'd lost everything in just a couple hours. And just like that, the aristocrat Lena was abandoned by everyone, left to fend for herself. She gripped the gates, furious, demanding to know how she was supposed to survive penniless. The girl was burning with resentment, unsure if she should keep yelling, hoping for mercy. She stood there frozen until a servant appeared behind her. It was her old nanny, her eyes filled with pain as she pointed to a carriage. Lena didn't understand what the carriage was for, since she had no idea what her father was planning. She suddenly guessed that her father had arranged a place for her to live. But her hopes were crushed by her nanny's negative response. The woman was sobbing, saying she'd been ordered to take her far away. Then, something in Liena's heart just froze when the woman offered to take her back to her homeland, saying it was safe there. The former noblewoman agreed, because she was flat out of options. She was totally lost, didn't know what to do, since she'd really been thrown out. The girl was so numb, she didn't even have the energy to cry or grieve anymore. The nanny tried to calm her down, saying her father knew she was innocent. Lena knew that was BS, because she didn't even show up in the novel until the last chapter. Right then and there, she pictured herself dying in some back alley, penniless. The thought of ending up like that scared the crap out of her, so she immediately protested. She figured she could change something, but everything was already set in stone. She realized maybe David wouldn't have dumped her if he wasn't such a jerk. No matter how long they dated, he always acted arrogant and full of himself. I guess that's why he fell for Kang Se-in, because she dared to talk to him like an equal. Lena immediately figured out how much of a pain it would be to live with such a donkey day to day. Before, her character was obsessed with being with him, but now her own happiness was in doubt. Realizing she'd probably never be happy with a guy like that, She decided to change her tune. Lena sighed heavily, deciding she'd just been set free. Thinking about starting her real life now, they finally arrived. Wiping away tears, the nanny hugged her tightly and begged for forgiveness. Lena was grateful for how much she risked for her, knowing her father's personality. She added, almost as an afterthought, that she'd pay back this kindness someday. The woman gently pulled away and told her not to worry. She said with a straight face that the Duke would be back for her once she was useful again. Lena knew she was right, but it still stung to hear those cold words. A thought suddenly popped into her head. Had they just dumped her here for some future advantage? She shook off the idea the second her sweet nanny said goodbye. Not knowing what was coming next, Lena said farewell to the person she loved most. The girl decided to look on the bright side. At least she had a roof over her head now. But her positive vibes crashed the moment she took in the state of the place. Lena, who was used to living large, stared in horror at the rundown mess. It suddenly hit her. She was basically dirt poor now. The girl couldn't believe she'd lived her whole life with a silver spoon, only to end up like this. The final straw was when the already shaky roof started leaking. She felt totally helpless, realizing everything now depended on her. Lena jumped to her feet and declared that this was real life. She wasn't about to starve to death waiting for some knight in shining armor. With that attitude, she managed to adapt in just a few months. The villagers couldn't believe the Duke's daughter was living in their backwater town. One of the women figured Lena was dead, until she spotted a chicken in her yard. That tiny detail immediately made them think she had to be alive. Lena ducked and held her breath when they started talking about how this chicken looked just like the one they lost. She kept hiding until the little girl spotted her peeking out from behind the house. The girl said sadly that the lady looked way too pathetic. The woman was about to make her daughter apologize before she saw Lena. They were shocked by the smile on the dirty girl's face as she offered them sweet potatoes. Luckily for her, the climate here was similar to where she lived in her past life. Before long, Lena was already getting started on growing crops. This soil and climate were perfect for grains. The girl was familiar with the local plants, which helped her keep from starving. The locals were amazed by such a delicious treat. They had no freaking clue something this good could even grow in their soil. During the chat, Lena found out apples here cost 1 coin for 3. The second she learned the real price, her face just dropped. Suddenly, an idea popped into her head about how to cash in on this find. Time kept ticking, and the girl had spent a full 6 years since arriving in Postan. In that time, she'd managed to make a name for herself and fix up her house. Despite her success 2 years back, she hit a wall when people stopped needing her stuff. She knew she desperately needed a new crop to sell, ASAP. The girl decided, clear as day, that her next big thing would be these amazing apples. Most folks here didn't know squat about farming or how to grow perfect fruit. That's exactly how she managed to create something that blew everyone's minds. It caught her off guard when they said this masterpiece was worthy enough to give to the lord of these lands. It pissed her off how fast the villagers bolted out of her way with her prized apple. Only then did she notice they were taking it to a distinguished woman. It was the first time Lena had ever seen the old woman who ruled these lands. She couldn't believe it was possible to grow such a massive apple without magic. Lena proudly introduced herself as the most genius farmer around. How shocked was she when the woman recognized her as the Duke Pon's daughter. The woman straight up said she even had reports on how she was doing, playing farmer out here. Lena smirked when the woman admitted she doubted the girl's skills were legit. She kept watching the woman fawn over it, then said the apple would cost 1 gold coin. Lena justified it by saying they were super rare, and she'd put in a ton of work. The second she let slip that she'd grown 20 of these apples, the ruler was totally shocked. She suddenly added that she could get way more than that for those fruits. The woman confessed she doubted Lena could ever adjust after living in the palace. But here the girl was, growing all kinds of the most delicious fruit imaginable. She was hyping up her peaches so much, the old lady couldn't help but swallow hard. Out of the blue, she offered her a job as the royal gardener. Sadly for her, Lena just shrugged and said she wasn't looking to work for anyone. The woman tried to talk some sense into her, saying her whole family had disowned her, but the girl didn't care. She was totally confident in herself, even offered to let me invest in her business. Lena also mentioned she could use some protection, seeing as she's all alone out here. Finally, the woman agreed and demanded she get everything she needs to get started. So, the girl sold off all her apples and then her peaches for even more cash. Lena bought land, hired some hands, and started raising livestock, boosting her sales. During one of these workdays, she heard about the wedding of Lord David, the guy who dumped her, but she didn't give a damn about his fate, or even the fact that she could have been queen. She just smiled and said she loved farming too much to even think about that kind of stuff. This year, her harvest was a record breaker, so she started selling in another village. She was chillin', thinking about what to plant next, just loving her success. Lena was so spaced out, she tripped and ate dirt face first. She rubbed the back of her head, which was throbbing, until she saw what she tripped on. No freaking way, she just found an actual freaking hoe. She couldn't believe she'd found such a diamond in the rough, amidst all the regular garden spades. Before she could even finish gloating, it suddenly lit up with this crazy blue light. The magic thing barely got the words out. "Are you my master now?" Before Lena was like, "Hell yeah!" Right after she said that, the enchanted tool flew right out of her hands. She couldn't believe her eyes when this magical sigil burned itself onto her hand. Then, bam! This gorgeous sword materialized in front of her, calling himself Louis Garbon Bontoir III. Even after getting used to this world, the tool's over-the-top fanciness still blew her mind. Lena was even more thrown when Louis called her his 10th master. Louis suddenly puffed up, saying even 10 volumes wouldn't be enough to tell his story. He introduced himself as a sword forged by the god of plenty, which is why everyone wanted him. Louis said he's super picky and only let future emperors wield him. His bragging didn't impress Lena. She just figured he was full of it. He added he'd hidden in a plain form because he kept ending up with idiots. Right then, the girl started to second-guess her choice. Meanwhile, Louis kept praising her for being able to see a beautiful flower buried in the dirt. Finally, he blessed the girl as a future ruler, until she called herself just a farmer. The sword just retorted sharply that who she is doesn't really matter. Lena tried telling him to find someone better, but he was already dead set on her. Eventually, the girl gave in and decided she'd just accept it. Figuring she'd just treat him like someone to talk to, she took him in her hand and offered to be friends. After a while, she ended up with the head lady, who was surprised to see all the plants growing like crazy. Liana thought it was a coincidence, until she heard even the dogs were popping out 8 puppies each, and all the eggs had double yolks. The Lord thought it was weird, but Liana just casually called it a good harvest. Despite everything Liana said, the woman still couldn't just ignore it. Lena was blown away by how careful she was being. She calmly sliced a fruit open until the woman noticed her bandaged hand. Lena couldn't admit that the seal of the Sword of Abundance was on her hand. So, out of the blue, she drops this bomb about finding something weird. The lady immediately freaks, thinking she's got metal poisoning or something. Lena shuts that down, saying she got a strange tattoo instead. Next thing you know, she's showing off this mark that's totally shocking. But to her surprise, the Lord just gives her the cold shoulder and tells her to bandage it back up. She also throws in that she's got a killer headache and Liana should buzz off. This sets off alarm bells for the girl, 'cause the lady's not one to send someone away just 'cause she's feeling a little rough. Back at the house, Lena immediately calls out to Louis all sweet-like, but for some reason, the sword's all mopey, like she did something wrong. He's pissed at her for coming to him after she'd been playing around with another sword. The girl calmed him down, saying she couldn't exactly carry a weapon in front of the madam. He didn't trust her at first, but man, he was still soaking up the compliment. She gently picked him up and promised she'd definitely bring him along next time. His flustered reaction made her wonder if a sword could actually have a soul. She realized he wasn't just able to talk, but he could also take on any form. Despite everything he could do, she still preferred her hoe. After that, she decided to share how incredibly bountiful this month's harvest was. Louis immediately puffed up, proudly declaring it was all thanks to his blessing. Lena didn't believe him, figuring all he did was float around the room. Louis protested, clearly annoyed, and kept repeating about the great god's blessing. All his arguments? Lena just laughed them off. The second she heard that guy's voice, she was instantly on alert. She bolted to the window, checking out the possible threat. 3 beefy dudes hanging around outside her window? Yeah, that's suspicious. Louis was stoked. He figured he could finally show off his skills and paint the hallway red. But Liana told him to hold his horses until she gave him the go-ahead. The sword gave her some courage, and she tightened her grip on the hilt. Imagine her surprise when she opened the door and found a tall blonde dude standing there. Even though he called her a cat burglar, she was still kinda mesmerized by how hot he was. Lena was thrown by how his choice of words didn't match his refined face at all. She was totally mesmerized by the guy's drop-dead gorgeous face. She decided to break the awkward silence and asked if he was her little kitten. Not long before, the queen had gotten back to talking about her divorce. She initiated the divorce from the emperor, who was completely floored by her decision. The woman stated firmly that she'd be the first in this case. She suddenly declared that she wouldn't mind being the first wife, that she'd kill her husband just to avoid the tiring divorce process. Back then, she thought she'd be forgotten after the divorce. But that wasn't the case. She became the grandmother of Cayman Marshall, the emperor of the Marshall Empire. She wanted to tell him something, but he asked her to lower her voice. The lady said that their relationship ended the day the divorce was announced in the cathedral, and he should just chill out around her. Even though she demanded it, Cayman didn't budge and just thanked her for the fruit. The lady called it a misunderstanding after he casually brought up the stolen item. Cayman pointed out the sword vanished from the imperial palace right when they divorced. On top of that, Poston's unusually massive harvest also raised some serious questions. He couldn't figure out why she kept insisting those two things were totally unrelated. The woman replied she was clean, since she left everything in the imperial palace during the divorce. The second Cayman asked about the sword's whereabouts. She blurted out it was someone else's. The ex-empress added that one of her vassals had made a contract with the sword. Cayman obviously wasn't buying it and figured she was straight up lying to him. The woman just added that no matter how much he grilled her, it was the honest truth. So, she figured he was just a farmer, and her name was Liana. That's when the emperor decided to head over to her place. Lena sized the guy up real quick and was surprised how respectful he was being. She couldn't believe a hottie like him just called her kitten. She backed off, said she'd hear him out at the door since he didn't seem like a criminal. The lackey standing next to him immediately got pissed at her nerve, but she didn't see the problem. Lena shut him down, saying he shouldn't expect politeness after barging in like that. He started to argue, but the blonde held up his hand and stopped him. Lena didn't get what he was really after and stayed on her guard. Still, he told her he was the owner of the sword she was holding. She immediately turned to Louis with a question, but he nervously insisted she was his only master. Lena looked back at the blonde guy, waiting for his answer. Louis was instantly offended at being called a double dealer. Looks like their little chat's drawing a lot of attention from this dude. Lena was surprised he, as the sword's true master, didn't know it could talk. No sooner did he say he knew about the sword's will than she called him quiet and calm. Finally, the girl declared he wasn't the owner and demanded an explanation. She coldly stated that if he lied, she wouldn't open the door again. Cayman introduced himself as Aurelia's grandson, the Grandma Lord. He added that the sword was a valuable item belonging to their family head. Cayman mentioned he'd vanished right after Grandma's divorce too. He tried offering a sweet deal, but Leon wasn't biting. Out of nowhere, Louis begged her, all sad-like, not to give him away, saying he'd stay by her side until her hair turned gray. Only then did Cayman finally realize Lien was his true owner. Louis said his family never gave a damn about him and demanded she call him by his real name. That question really made Cayman stop and think. When he didn't answer, Lien said she couldn't give the sword to someone who wasn't its true owner. Cayman said the sword was super valuable, and he'd stoop to some shady stuff to get it. Lien protested, bringing up Louis's wishes, but Cayman just called him a weapon. The guy suddenly got serious, saying he didn't want to use force against a delicate girl like her. Lena straight up said her mind wouldn't change, even if he was the most powerful dude on the planet. But her tough act started to crack the second he got close, so she took charge, touched his lips, and told him her little kitten needed to pipe down. Her pulling that move was so out there, Cayman just froze. Lena was surprised by his reaction, 'cause she thought he was about to propose some kind of marriage deal. Her reasoning was that he'd hinted at using some shady tactics. She added that it'd be the only legit way for him to get his hands on that sword. Even though she was right, Cayman was still blown away by what she was thinking. After a short pause, he just blurted out and asked her to marry him. Lena was wary of his offer and said he should at least get down on one knee. She was stoked when he jumped to it and did exactly what she asked. Even though he was down, she still had to turn him down. Then she slammed the door shut right in his face. That move was so cold, everyone was shocked. They couldn't hide it. They tried to get through to Lina, but she wasn't budging. Louis chimed in, saying everyone looked like they'd sucked on lemons. He was psyched when she said she wasn't leaving the house today. Still, she was starting to think maybe she should just hand over the sword to this hottie. Meanwhile, Cayman Marshall was lost in thought, realizing how badly he'd been played. For some weird reason, he felt like he was under some kind of spell. He was definitely hooked by Leanna's wavy hair and cute face. Even so, he couldn't believe a girl that gorgeous would pull a stunt like that. After losing, he returned to the palace where his grandma greeted him. She was shocked when he suddenly announced he'd have to push her aside. She thought he'd take Leanna back to the Empire, but he fell for her tricks. He smirked, saying she had the nerve to declare marriage was the only legit way to get the sword. The lady knew Leanna was bold, but she couldn't believe she'd offer that to the Emperor. He clenched his fist, telling her how she slammed the door after making the offer. Despite his anger, he knew he couldn't go back empty-handed. His fiery look made his grandma realize the stakes were getting higher. Her grandson used to be calculating and cold, but now he was just eating up the drama. She hoped, with a warm feeling, that this would blossom into love. After hiding for 2 days, Lena had a really weird dream. She dreamed of something yellow, soft, and sweet, but couldn't figure out what it was. As soon as she woke up, she immediately thought of a pumpkin. It fit the description. She jumped out of bed so fast, she actually face-planted on the floor. Her mind instantly filled with thoughts of sweet pumpkin paired with bouncy noodles. Thinking about that delicious food immediately made her want to go harvest some crops. Lewis didn't quite catch what she was saying and figured she wanted to chop off some enemy heads. But that wasn't it. He judged her outfit choice, not realizing she was heading to the garden, not the battlefield. The girl said the outfit was perfect, but she'd need his help with something. She quickly sketched a tool on a piece of paper and asked him to take that shape. Lewis instantly obeyed his mistress, transforming into a handy pair of shears. He was seriously ticked off that he'd been tricked so cleverly. Lewis reacted with utter disgust at the plant sap dripping all over him. Lena was so engrossed in harvesting that she didn't even notice Cayman at first. He explained he came here after hearing voices and wanted to offer a hand. Looks like he didn't recognize Louis in his new gig. Figured he wasn't around. He stared intently at the scissors and finally recognized them as the ego sword. Lena decided to tease Lewis, saying he loved serving her this way. She wanted the sword to side with her, but Cayman said he wasn't giving it up. Right away, she asked if he was one of those obsessed dudes, which totally caught him off guard. The girl figured she'd take advantage of him being there and asked for help hauling some pumpkins. He finally caved when she offered to treat him to a meal. With pride, Lena presented him with a lunch blessed by the mountain god. It didn't exactly blow him away. He immediately thought it was peasant food. Lena grinned and announced that she wanted to start a meal kit business someday. Finally, Cayman admitted he couldn't get enough of the soup. While he was digging in, Lena secretly admired how gorgeous he was. It made her happy to see how much he was enjoying her soup. She decided to show him her new tea concoction, something she hadn't shown anyone else. Cayman took the drink and was surprised to find ice in it. The girl announced she'd dug a special ice cave with a shovel. The guy went to offer her some help, but she shot back that she could handle it herself. For some reason, those words earned her his respect. Cayman was blown away by her persistence and drive, something he hadn't seen in girls before. He smiled softly and told her that she was truly something else. A couple of years back, an angel descended upon the lands of the Barker Kingdom. Some figured she was a demon, while others thought they should pay their respects to the visitor. Plenty tried to use her, and eventually she fell for the crown prince and got engaged to him. Thing is, she had a pretty notorious temper. Her name was Kang Sena, the one who knew how to play Prince David. Her life wasn't all sunshine and romance, and reality hit her hard. This face used to charm David, but now all he felt was annoyance. Kang Sena demanded answers and wanted him to admit he was dodging her. She was pissed that they hadn't really talked in ages. David, getting annoyed himself, shot back that she wasn't exactly making an effort to talk things out either. He reminded her how she'd recently flipped out because he danced with Lady Altair and didn't give her the mermaid's tear. Kang Sena immediately turned the tables, reminding him how he'd wanted to make Lady Altair his concubine. David tried to justify himself, saying it was all about important political connections. Sane was pissed at how easily he made new connections, knowing she had no one but him. She called him spineless for always hiding behind the excuse of important politics. Every word she said just ratcheted up his anger even more. He ordered her dragged out of the office, but Sine kept fighting back. She couldn't believe he was treating an alien princess this way. He used to swear eternal love, and now he's building a harem of concubines. She was floored by how much her beloved prince had changed, something that wasn't in the novel. Once they were alone, David mocked her demand to have a normal conversation. He dumped Liena because Kang Sane was recognized as the cathedral's holy maiden. David thought Duke Pond would beg him to take Liena as a concubine, but instead, he kicked her out in disgrace. Him joining that other faction makes him a threat to David now, and on top of that, it pissed him off that Lena never acted like Kang Sena. He couldn't believe he was actually starting to miss her. David tried to get intel on her, but there was nothing to find. He doubted it, didn't think she could survive among the commoners. The guy suddenly realized that Kang Sena was pointless now. He got fired up with the idea of getting Liena back as crown princess, winning over the girl and her dad. His ego was pumped, picturing her falling to her knees, overjoyed. Meanwhile, Cayman was thinking the exact same thing about his new acquaintance. He couldn't figure out what she could do with those hands of hers. They looked like they'd break with a single touch. He couldn't shake the thought of that ice cave she'd dug out. His assistant was all, "Hey, what's got you so spaced out and quiet?" Out of nowhere, Cayman asks how much ice costs and how they keep it cold. The guy's like, "Dude, that stuff comes from the magic tower. Mages deliver it. You can't just buy it." That just made Cayman even more confused. He needed someone with experience to give him some straight-up advice. Like magic, Lena shows up at his palace carrying baskets. She had no clue Cayman lived there too, so she was totally surprised. Suddenly, the young dude's thinking she's there looking for him, but then she throws him for a loop, getting worried about his sunburned face. She was immediately stoked she'd thought to bring something with her. Leanna whipped out an aloe leaf, saying there was no need to waste money on potions when they had this. Just as Cayman started thinking about the mark on her palm, she pulled his attention back. She grinned, showing him the aloe, saying it works wonders on burns. Lena added that her grandma grows agave, which is kinda like aloe. Cayman was surprised how common folk survive, which made Lena smile. He wondered if she learned that from her parents, but Lena said she didn't have any. Seeing the guy's surprise, she quickly tried to explain. The girl stated that she does have parents, but she's not their biological daughter. Cayman still felt awkward, which just proved he was a good guy. She mentioned she was adopted as a kid, then dumped after a messed up engagement. Honestly, she was cool with it, 'cause now she could live her life however she wanted. Even though she sounded happy about it, Cayman was still feeling all kinds of messed up. She gave him a pat, noticing how considerate he was being about her feelings. Cayman froze solid the second he felt Leanna's gentle touch. I don't think she even realized what she'd done until she saw his face turn beet red. She awkwardly rattled the basket, repeating she wasn't giving him Louis. All her racket got Grandma's attention, and she showed up on the double. At first, she only spotted Cayman, but then she was surprised to see Leanna there too. Grinning like crazy, she teased the lovebirds about their blushing faces. The woman greeted them right away, but Cayman straight up called her Grandma in a showy way. The way he said it made her think that Leanna didn't know he was royalty. She decided to play along and called him her grandson, then asked how they met. Cayman got awkward at how Leanna was painting the picture of their interactions. Grandma immediately suggested they drop the formalities and become friends, seeing as they're the same age. The guy tried to argue, but Lena backed her up, calling it fate. Cayman felt like they were definitely messing with him and told her to do whatever she wanted. Lena smiled and offered them some watermelon punch. As soon as they saw her creation, they were instantly amazed. Lena didn't reveal the secrets of the recipe, which she'd previously worked Louis half to death for. Cayman figured Louis was behind it, but she shot that down right away. Changing the subject, she stubbornly stabbed a piece of watermelon and shoved the fork in his mouth. The Emperor wanted to protest, but her caring gesture flustered him. He stared thoughtfully at Liana's smile and said the watermelon was too sweet. Once he was alone, it suddenly hit him that this watermelon was sweeter than any other. He thought it was a coincidence, but the properties were actually different. Before meeting her, Cayman only thought about strengthening his power, not about the lives of ordinary people. He felt ashamed that he hadn't even cared how what he was eating was made. The guy suddenly remembered how Leanna had offered him juice not long ago. It surprised him that it was made from leftover grapes. He figured he tasted bad because he was leftovers, but Lena explained she put just as much love and effort into him. Cayman froze when she drew an analogy to a person whose worth could drop because of slander. At first, he just wanted the sword, but now he understood why it chose her as its master. All these thoughts stirred up a desire in him to talk to Leanna more. Imagine his surprise when the girl was right below his balcony. She was saying goodbye to him, shining just as brightly even from afar. He wanted to say goodbye back, but something inside stopped him. Meanwhile, Lena was stoked about the goodies she got from her grandma. She relished remembering all the praise the woman showered on her creations. Lena was peacefully thinking about her next dish when Louis started talking to her. He was crushed that she lied about coming back earlier. She started spilling about her day, but Louis got even angrier finding out that jerk was there too. He saw the guy as a direct threat and straight up despised him. Sword told Lena about the Marshal's ruthlessness, saying they're only nice as long as she's useful. Lena kinda spaced on the name, even though it sounded super familiar. Louis grumbled, telling her not to be without her loyal protector and to remember their evil. She decided to ask him if he really planned on staying with her forever. She knew her life wasn't a battlefield, but Louis was still determined to be loyal. Lena felt like he was holding back, especially considering he bailed from the royal family. Then she was shocked to see Louis suddenly duck for cover. She couldn't believe her eyes when her old nanny was standing right in front of her. After all these years apart, she was still happy to see the woman who raised her and gave her a home. She immediately took her inside and offered her a drink. The woman was surprised that Lena had moved out of that dump and into a new place. Lena felt conflicted because she hadn't been visited once in all these years. She played hostess, asking what kind of tea she wanted, pointing to the different herbs. The girl remembered her nanny's love for tea and made her chamomile. The whole time, the woman watched every move of the aristocrat she'd once abandoned. After a couple of minutes, Lena served her an excellent, fragrant tea. She decided to ask if the Lord had helped her out, totally clueless about what was really going on. Nanny thought the Lord would take pity on a damsel in distress, all thanks to her meddling. Figuring she was right, she took a relieved gulp of her drink. That ticked Lena off, seeing as she clawed her way to survival all on her own. The nanny said she shouldn't lie, because she couldn't even earn a living. Lena noticed they were looking down on her now, deciding there was no need to be nice anymore. The nanny got indignant when the girl quoted a price for chamomile tea, thinking she had no right to charge a guest. Lena shot back, all nasty, that she was the one who started acting out of line. The girl called her out for acting like her hard work meant nothing. Then she turned away and told her to hit the road if she was done talking. The nanny instantly changed her tune and begged for a minute, but Leanna wasn't budging. Still, she froze when she heard the Duke's order to bring her back home. The nanny started crying, saying how hard it had been for him since she left. She went on and on about how much he was suffering. Her words only fueled Leanna's anger, 'cause she clearly didn't buy any of that crap. The nanny went silent when she asked if he'd found a new way to use her. Lena realized there was no concern in this at all and ordered her to get out now. The woman threatened to tell the Duke, but Leanna just cursed his name. Just as the nanny reached the doorway, Lena threw in a couple of nasty insults. The door slammed shut behind her, and a wave of unpleasant feelings washed over her body. A new day dawned, and Cayman started us off by talking to his sister. The whole time, he's been spacing out, and couldn't even say when he'd snap out of it. Princess Rise said it wasn't right for him to be overstaying his welcome like this. After the divorce, his grandma went back home, and they gave her land on the border with the Empire. The former emperor missed her so much, he set up a teleportation zone. Cayman wanted to say he felt bad for her, but she immediately told him why he was stalling. She guessed he was either still obsessed with his sword, or he was head over heels for the first time ever. Cayman called it ridiculous, but the blush on his face gave him away. He couldn't believe Leanna was stuck in his head, even during meetings. A knight came into the office and reported something fishy was going on in Postine, and someone was tailing Leanna. Also, a maid connected to the observers paid her a visit the other day. He mentioned that according to Madame Aurelian, these guys might be connected to Leanna's ex-fiancé. Cayman instantly remembered her talking about their messy breakup. The Emperor couldn't believe they had the nerve to come back now that Leanna was thriving and doing her own thing. He stormed towards the exit, dead set on saving her. Still, he knew it might look a little weird, coming from just a friend. All these feelings got him wondering why he was so pissed off. He justified it by figuring if she got snatched, the sword would disappear with her. Cayman vividly imagined Leanna getting dragged out of her house. It was even worse picturing her ex begging her to come back, playing on her loneliness. That second thought was way scarier than the first, which is why he bolted to her side. He ordered a perimeter sweep while he checked out the girl. The dead silence instantly made him think she might have split with that scumbag. The second he heard her scream, he busted into the house. First thing he saw was her holding something up and begging for help. He froze when he saw she was holding up a busted ceiling beam. Turns out, the boards in the corner of the ceiling had rotted and started to decay. Lena added that she'd already ripped out the damaged part and had replacement boards. She couldn't help but wonder if she should ask Cayman for help. The guy was about to suggest hiring a carpenter, but she was ready to do it herself. She chuckled, saying there probably wasn't a carpenter to be found in a village like this. Besides, it wouldn't be safe for her to invite him over when she's alone. She couldn't help but remember the nanny's sneer, who had no idea she was out there patching the roof with straw all by herself. Lena thought it seemed like the nanny was jealous of her good fortune and used to be happy when things were tough for her. Cayman suddenly noticed the hammer in her hand. She smiled as Louis protested being used again. The girl calmed him down again, saying she only uses him in emergencies. Louis pulled her aside and said he still didn't think a hammer was the best choice. The girl didn't even realize she was practically on the floor after the collision. She didn't understand where the warmth she felt came from, where she had fallen. Turns out, she'd crashed right into Cayman, who'd shielded her from hitting the floor. He jumped up right away, asking how she was feeling. Lena, being alone for so long, was so flustered she couldn't even speak. She immediately backed away, saying she was totally fine. Even though Cayman was way worse off, All he cared about was how she was doing. He gently rubbed the back of her head, telling her to be careful. When he found no bumps on her head, Cayman breathed a sigh of relief. Lena wasn't used to a guy caring for her, so she just kept staring at him, embarrassed. Cayman already seemed attractive, but now she couldn't take her eyes off him. She scolded herself for spacing out and forgetting how good-looking he was. It felt weird to Lena, the idea of suddenly seeing him as a man and not just a friend. She realized he was actually the perfect husband material. Cayman snapped to attention and noticed she was acting weird and kinda blushing. He started checking her hand, clueless that he should be checking her heart. The guy anxiously pointed out that her hand was swollen and looked pretty painful. Lena just awkwardly looked away and said she got off easy. As soon as she mentioned it was all thanks to him, she instantly remembered how warm his body felt. She tried to push those thoughts away, but they just wouldn't leave her head. Finally, Cayman said he was a pro at applying bandages. After a little while, he gently wrapped the girl's hand. Lena didn't understand why her heart was pounding like crazy over something so simple. Dude actually asked if anything happened, like he forgot how she ended up on top of him. He checked out her smile and felt relieved that she was okay. He decided to bail, leaving Leanna wondering why he was so concerned. She stopped him, invited him to lunch, but he turned her down flat. He paused at the door and told her to hit him up if she needed anything. Lena was so thrown off, all she could do was agree. Once alone, Lewis apologized for the whole incident. Talk about a shocker. She kissed him, genuinely thanking him for everything. It suddenly hit her that if it weren't for him, she never would have landed in the arms of that haughty nobleman. Lena declared that loser David wasn't fit to lick his boots and looked like a dried-up squid. Still, the fact that Cayman only wanted Lewis kinda creeped her out. The idea that this whole thing was just about the sword totally killed her vibe. Even so, she was still down to play along with his little seduction game. I mean, the dude was way too hot to resist his charm offensive. Realizing the mess she was in, the girl let out a heavy sigh. Now she got why emperors throughout history caved to good-looking people. All the same, Lena still felt bad he left on an empty stomach. The second she mentioned potatoes, Lewis freaked. Thinking she'd turn him into a hoe, Lena calmed him down and started boiling potatoes. Then he suggested Cayman might be the emperor. She didn't take him seriously and told him he was hot enough to be one himself. The girl went on high alert the second she heard footsteps outside the door. She couldn't figure out who'd be showing up this late and guessed it was Cayman. Thinking he was back for some food, Lena naively opened the door, not knowing who was there. Meanwhile, Cayman was deep in the trenches with his own stuff. He was carefully reading every document, trying to wrangle every last bit of focus he had. Still, his head was a total mess after everything that went down. Guess his grandma noticed he was out of it and asked him if he was all right. She said she brought him a snack and set a plate down. Cayman glanced at the dish, surprised, and asked what it was. He was taken aback, saying it looked like a full-on dinner, but she just told him to try it. The Emperor was blown away by how good that snack tasted. While he was chowing down, Aurelian decided to dig a little deeper into Leanna's help today. He had to ask her, did the common folk always carry the whole load themselves, even when they had the cash? Aurelian said it was awesome that Leanna did everything herself. Cayman suddenly got worried again about Leanna's injured wrist. The old woman replied not to sweat it. She made the sandwich and brought it as thanks for the help. She also pointed out that the girl looked kinda pale. Figuring that Leanna barely ever took a break, Aurelian left the office. Cayman looked at the sandwich with a soft smile and decided he'd check on her tomorrow. He suddenly blushed, realizing he was just looking for an excuse to see her. His sweet dreams vanished the second he realized there was a hitman outside the window. He whipped around, trying to figure out the threat level. You can imagine his surprise when it turned out to be Louis. He asked if Louis was trying to become his, but Louis immediately shot that down. Cayman felt like the sword was trying to tell him something urgent, but couldn't get the words out. Finally, he figured something must have happened to Lena. Meanwhile, the girl was lying in bed, burning up with a fever. She was usually in perfect health, but just one meeting messed her up this bad. She knew this was coming, but the stress was unavoidable. That evening, she opened the door expecting Cayman, but she was wrong. Standing in the doorway was her arrogant, heartless father. Despite the revulsion, she still let him inside. He immediately started whining about how he'd been withering away with worry for his daughter. Leanna was clueless about what was happening, because this wasn't in the novel. In the original, Kang Saena got engaged 2 years after showing up in this world, and that was it. Still, things had been weird from the jump this time. Lena couldn't figure out why everything was moving so fast. After the story's climax, the original Leanna was supposed to die. unable to handle the hardship. But now, the guy who never gave a damn was standing right in front of her. Trying to figure out why he was here, she reminded her dad that he had 5 other daughters. The guy said he got how she felt, but helping her would piss off the royals big time. He pulled this scary face and said the crown prince felt sorry for her and was secretly looking for her. Lena didn't buy that crap. Knowing David just needed the backing of the Pond family, she knew he'd catch flack from the nobles for ditching the perfect bride. The very idea of being used like that made her sick to her stomach. Lena yanked her hand away and coldly told him it wasn't her problem. Duke Pond was trying to play on her wanting to be the crown princess, but she didn't give a damn. She just told him she wasn't a Pond anymore, just Lyanna. She stood up and told him to think about his other daughters, the ones who wanted to be princesses. The guy was shocked at her resistance and asked if she really thought a single word could break blood ties. Lena smirked, remembering how he'd disowned his own kid. The Duke was floored by her nerve and stood up, but that played right into her hands. She grinned, opened the door, and said goodbye to her father. As a parting shot, she told him he was just a duke, not a dad, and that was that. After showing him the door, she knew this wasn't over. She couldn't help wondering what they'd come up with next, and if David would pay her a personal visit. Lena imagined him cooing with Sina, and now trying to track her down. She felt like her father would definitely cook up something else soon to hand her over to David. The girl wasn't about to let the prince barge into her life, because she didn't do anything. She was racking her brain for ways she could dodge her fate. Louis noticed she was lost in thought, but she snapped right back to thinking about potatoes. The sword sensed her sadness and wanted her to open up, but she didn't want to talk about it. Despite the bright smile, tears still streamed down her cheeks. Lena thought she was okay, but the pain still gnawed at her heart. Seeing the girl's tears, Louis regretted for the first time that he couldn't turn human. Lena gently hugged her little buddy and told him everything would be all right soon. Even thinking about it before bed, the girl still couldn't hold back her tears. In a flash, Cayman, looking all worried, was right in front of her. The second she showed signs of waking up, he bolted to get water and medicine. The girl kinda directed him, saying the medicine might be in her bag. Cayman was thrown for a loop when she told him not to mix up her bag, saying she had to leave soon. She was practically rambling when she added that she had to hurry. It hit the guy hard, 'cause he thought Poston had become her home. The girl said Poston was a good, cozy place, and she loved Grandma Aurelian. But even so, she still didn't have a place she could really call home. Cayman didn't respond to that and just went back to hitting on her. He figured her running away might have something to do with her ex-fiancé, the one who came looking for her last time. The guy felt like there could only be one reason for a getaway like this. Most likely, David realized how awesome she was and was trying to get her back. His heart skipped a beat again when tears started welling up in her eyes. It broke his heart to see her crying, even in her sleep. Cayman couldn't even figure out which guy made the usually radiant Lyanna break down like that. On impulse, he kissed her fingers and vowed to become her protector. The next morning, she woke up feeling a little better. Louis immediately snuggled up to her, worried, and said he'd never seen his master so weak. She wasn't mad at Louis and told him she had to hurry. Imagine her surprise when she saw the gorgeous Cayman standing there in an apron. He thought she was uncomfortable with him being there, but she was already thanking all the gods for his good looks. She got up and started to say she was super busy today. Cayman grinned, took off the apron, and offered her some breakfast. He carefully whipped up breakfast for her. Eggs and sausage, the works. She started eating, totally thrown, wondering why he'd even do this for her. Cayman asked where she was going, what was up with the bag. Lena told him she wasn't trying to ditch Poston for good. She was surprised Cayman was even asking where she was headed. Out of nowhere, he said, dead serious, that he was going with her. She didn't get why he'd bail, since he had a ton of stuff to take care of back in Poston. He explained that she'd be carrying the ego sword, which was his main goal. Then he waved it off and said that wasn't the real reason. Cayman gently squeezed her injured hand and confessed he was worried about her. She got all flustered when he told her he didn't want her to go through pain alone. Cayman said she needed someone to wake her up from nightmares and be her rock. He kept holding her hand tight, promising he'd be there for her. Lean really appreciated the concern, but she felt like she had to turn him down. Cayman added that he wasn't just saying that, and if she wasn't sure, they could head back to his place. Lean smirked, asking if he was about to propose again. Little did she know, the next thing she knew, he'd be down on one knee. He held out his hand and asked if she was ready to be his wife. The girl was stunned and didn't understand how she'd gotten into this situation. Louis suddenly spoke up, saying the guy was genuine, and he'd rushed to her yesterday as soon as he heard she was feeling bad. Still, Lena figured this marriage could put Kamen in danger. Seeing as she hadn't told him about where she came from, the right thing seemed to be just saying no. But the guy's charm and sincerity were getting to her, killing her resolve. He just kept staring into her eyes, making her heart pound like crazy. Lena felt like it wasn't fair to turn down someone who cared so much. She couldn't bring herself to say no and wanted him to make the call. The girl jumped up and blurted out that she was the Duke Pon's daughter. She thought that would change his mind, considering his dad's status. But Kamen didn't even flinch. She added that she was just trying to ditch her dad for a while by running away. Then she suddenly thought, maybe she didn't have to run that far after all. Lena thanked him for the idea and figured she just needed to find a place to lay low. She was about to head out, but a dude's hand stopped her. Kamen pulled her close and reminded her she still hadn't answered his confession. Lena was totally floored, but she still decided to buy herself some time. He promised he'd be there for her, but she wasn't sure he could stand up to the Duke. Kamen told her not to sweat it and just focus on him so she could answer. The next thing she knew, he did something that totally got to her. He touched her face and asked her to go out with him, thinking about marriage down the line. Meanwhile, Kamen's sister was chilling in her office. She gave the crystal ball a surprised look when the Emperor decided to hit her up. She ripped into him for calling out of the blue and told him to get a life. Again, she was taken aback by how heavy and quiet his sighs were. It was weird, because before Poston, he was a total workaholic. Reese decided she'd just hear him out and make him work it off. But then he blindsided her, saying he'd met a woman he wanted to marry. She was so stunned, she couldn't even find the right words. Once it sunk in, she just started screaming loud enough to shake the whole imperial palace. She asked if he was actually talking about a real woman and not a cat. After calming down, she said she'd dig up some dirt on ending Liena Pon's engagement. Kamen added, with a nasty edge, that he wanted to wipe the Pond family off the map, or annex Postine to their territory. Riz's head was spinning with all these ridiculous requests. Then it hit her. She remembered the real reason he was even in Postine. She reminded him that his main goal was supposed to be the sword of self-love. Kamen just calmly responded that it was nothing to worry about. Riz sighed and asked if she'd agreed to the marriage. She figured Liena would jump at the chance to marry the Emperor, but Kamen was leaving stuff out. Anticipating his sister's surprise, he revealed that he hadn't mentioned his imperial title yet. Meanwhile, Lena still hadn't recovered from what just happened. She couldn't stop thinking about how passionately Kamen had pinned her against the wall. She didn't know what to do, because it was obvious he was into her. Kamen stroked her face, kept asking what was making her hesitate. Lena was floored when he went and blamed it on her missing her ex. She fired back, asking him how he could even say something like that. The girl was lost, seeing as she barely knew anything about Kamen. Still, she managed to spill her guts about how she felt about him. She couldn't believe they were officially a thing, feelings out in the open. Next day, she spent at her grandma's place, chatting about some new plant. The old lady was going on about the effects, but Liena couldn't focus. Looks like her grandma finally noticed the girl was totally out of it. She yelled at Liena, and Liena jumped a mile, scared out of her mind. Aurelian was worried because Lena used to light up at the mere mention of farming, but Liena couldn't admit that her eyes were now sparkling because of her hot grandson. Out of nowhere, she blurted out that her dad had visited recently. Lena didn't know the exact reason, but she suspected the prince needed her for something. The woman immediately got pissed that he dared to come onto her land behind her back. Lena added that at first, she'd been thinking about leaving Postine. She barely managed to choke out that her boyfriend had asked her to stay. Looks like, without even thinking, she just revealed her relationship with Kamen. At first, the woman had no idea that this guy was her grandson and started asking questions. Lena was embarrassed to answer, but Kamen, who walked into the room, did it for her. Lady Aurelian stared at the two of them, like totally not believing what just happened. Immediately, she's pushing for a wedding next week and popping out 3 kids afterwards. She cooled her jets a bit when she found out they basically just met yesterday. The young couple couldn't really explain what sparked their feelings for each other. Aurelian's heart just soared, watching them gently hold hands. She went to ask Liena about her plans, but all she said was she was thinking of hiding in an ice cave. No way was she letting that happen, so she offered her the castle. She explained her dad would never get near her there, no matter how much of a scumbag he is. Lena didn't want to be a bother, but Aurelian was actually thrilled. She smiled sweetly, so stoked to have met such awesome people in Poston. The woman smiled back and said she was glad to be a good person for her. Finally, Kamen ordered that Liena be given a room right next to his. Everyone was stunned by this decision, but he played it off as a security measure. Lena knew that might not be the only reason, and her heart started racing. She hinted to the guy that he was acting way too flustered. Liana got up to follow the butler, promising she'd be right back. No sooner had she left the room than Aurelian pounced on the Emperor. She didn't like that he was still keeping Liana in the dark. Looks like Cayman didn't get the real reason for her anger, and figured it was because of Lena's background. She reminded him that Lena still had no clue he was the Emperor. Cayman started sweating bullets when she said the girl might get pissed if she found out the truth. He explained he wasn't trying to hide it, but he was just too damn scared to say anything. The dude was genuinely terrified she'd pick the farm and ditch him. He was so worked up saying it, his grandma couldn't even buy his reason. She froze when he asked her opinion on whether she'd choose the farm over him. The woman figured that even though Liana seemed happy in Poston, he still needed to spill the beans. From her own experience, she already knew that relationships built on lies are just a total sham. Once, her husband said he wasn't gonna live just for her and broke her heart with his random flings. He called it audacity, the way she acted, considering she wore the Empress's crown. She anxiously added that she really did think of him as her dear grandson, and Lena as a friend. That's exactly why she wanted them to live happily, and without the pain she once suffered. Aurelian was known for her swordsmanship, but she was equally known for her miserable marriage. That's why Cayman couldn't let Liana give up her dreams for him. He became certain that by protecting Liana and her farm, they could actually be happy. He spent the rest of the day just lost in thought, replaying his grandma's words. It suddenly hit him that the only real option was to bring Postine into the Empire's territory. For the first time ever, he was actually scared of being rejected. But the second he heard Liana's happy voice outside the door, all his worries just melted away. She was so happy that Cayman had figured everything out. She was practically squealing about how awesome her boyfriend was. Still, she couldn't figure out who this guy was. The way he shrugged off the mention of her dad. She figured he had to be some big shot, but she'd never seen him around the duchy before. The girl flashed him a smile when he asked if she was doing all right. Glad she was comfy, Cayman suggested they take a walk. Lena was practically fighting to hide how flustered she was, now that they were alone. She kept stealing glances at the guy. Looks like all that sass she had was gone, judging by the look on her face. She couldn't figure out why she was so awkward. It's not like this was their first stroll. For the first time, the girl felt the thrill of a date, the kind that made her heart skip a beat. Back then, every time she met up with David, it was nothing but torture, never any fun. He'd ditch her every time, saying it was business, but he was really running off to Sena. Lena couldn't stop him from doing what he wanted, and just felt her heart getting heavier and heavier. She'd been ordered to keep her mouth shut the whole time, just taking whatever David dished out. That's why she was so damn sensitive to every little thing Cayman did. She never thought anyone would ever treat her the way he did. She couldn't even dream of someone holding her hand gently, instead of just pointing. It hurt so bad. Tears just started streaming down her face. She wiped them away quick, shocked that she could even fall for someone. Feeling how deep Cayman had gotten into her heart, she smiled brightly and said she liked holding hands. It sounded so genuine, he couldn't help but blush. He looked down, asking her to wait a little longer, because he didn't want to let her down. She squeezed his hand tight and told him she'd wait and that she believed in him. And they kept walking together until nightfall, which Lena spent back in her room. She smiled, remarking that she'd almost forgotten what it was like to sleep in such luxury. Lena admitted she had this uneasy feeling, like she'd forgotten something. Finally, the guy she promised to return to, but didn't, showed up behind her. Lena laid her sword down beside her and said they'd be staying here for a while. Without telling him the details, she fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, she was surprised to see a young blonde standing in front of her. At first, she didn't understand what was going on and figured it was a dream. Making sure she was still asleep, she rolled over to her other side. Can you believe it? The girl called her out for even thinking about catching some Z's. This random chick pointed her finger all judgy and docked her 20 points. Totally stunned, Lena immediately asked her who the hell she was. All she did was majestically announce that her name was Susan. Lena introduced herself the same way and shook her hand. Then awkward silence. She mentally kicked herself for not having Louis around right now. Just in case, she mentioned it was her room, but Susan already knew. She threw Liana for a loop, saying she just popped in to say hi. She still had no clue what was going on, but it made her smile anyway. Finally, they went for a walk. With Susan sticking to the girl like glue, Lena decided to step out to kill the awkwardness, but she just kept following. Susan asked her where she was going, but Liana just said she felt like a stroll. All she said, cool as can be, was that liking to move around was a plus. Noticing everyone greeting her along the way, Lena figured she posed no threat. The second she mentioned liking Poston, Susan piped up that the Empire was better. Out of nowhere, she asked what Lena thought about the Emperor. Lena figured the rumors about her harvest must have reached the Empire. Not knowing Susan's real angle, she decided this was a prime opportunity for expansion. On the path, she randomly spotted some raspberries growing. Lena said she doesn't need to shower because of the clean air and told me to try it. Susan said the raspberries were sour, but the girl shot back that you can make jam out of them. She was actually surprised that Lena knew how to make jam herself. Noticing she looked like Cayman, she offered to help her pick raspberries. Meanwhile, Lewis was watching Cayman's intense training, paying close attention. He used to think he was just the dumb emperor's grandson, but his skills were impressive. The sword could feel a strong ego radiating off him. You could see it in his confident stare. This guy reminded him of his first master. He met the sword once and declared himself the strongest. Louis was captivated by his burning desire to defeat the dragon and accepted him as his new master. Back then, this kid was just some nobody. Later, he became a legendary hero and emperor of a massive empire, Louis Marshall. The higher he climbed, the more his sword just became a showpiece. Louis put up with it. But his patience snapped with the last idiot emperor. He couldn't believe he ran into this descendant way out in Postine, especially after he'd left. Louis was floored when Cayman spotted him hiding behind that tree. He immediately started making excuses, saying he wasn't spying, just making sure everything was going smoothly. Cayman didn't even hear him. He just said he was serious about Lena. Louis couldn't hold back tears when Cayman added that he respected his dedication to serving Lena. Cayman asked if Louis wanted to be swung around a bit, then confidently scooped Louis up in his hand. Louis decided to test him, see if he's worthy to be Lena's partner. At first, Louis resisted, but he was blown away by Cayman's confident moves. He was totally mesmerized by the guy's off-the-charts abilities. Conflicting feelings raged inside him, until he heard his master's voice. Lena was shocked to find Louis hanging out with her boyfriend. The sword immediately latched onto her, crying, and said he was a bad sword. He accidentally knocked over a whole bundle of raspberries, sending them flying at Susan. Lena sat wearily on the ground, rubbing where she'd bumped herself. Susan asked how she was doing and showed her the raspberries she'd saved. Cayman was surprised to see these two girls together. Susan was the second princess of the Marshall Empire and Cayman's sister. They ended up in the kitchen, where Lena started whipping up some raspberry tea. Lena was constantly freaking out about Susan cutting herself. Once she was done with the raspberries, she walked her through making the tea, step by step. 10 minutes later, they were ready to unveil their iced raspberry tea masterpiece. Lena almost dropped the tray when she saw the dude all flushed after his workout. She tried to play it cool and ordered him to go dry his hair. Susan was watching them interact, totally absorbed. As soon as they were all together, the girl smiled and offered them the fresh tea. To her sister's surprise, the vibe between her grandma and brother was different than usual. Susan couldn't figure out why they were being so chummy, considering Cayman's situation. She suddenly had a hunch that Lena might not even know Cayman's the emperor. Cayman and the lady's strained expressions totally confirmed her suspicion. She wanted to call them out on it, but her brother changed the subject just in time. He hauled her into a room for a sudden private chat, like lightning fast. Lady Aurelian explained that Cayman has twin sisters, and one of them decided to drop by for a visit. That line made her think he was trying to hide his sister-in-law's existence. With all this stuff going on, she realized with a jolt that she actually felt like she was part of the family now. A few days ago, Susan and Reese were arguing about their brother coming back to the Empire. She just couldn't believe that that cat-loving guy could actually fall in love. The girl suddenly remembered the sword of self-esteem and figured he was probably off searching for it. She bounced, but not before saying she'd personally drag her brother and his future bride-to-be here. Susan called it BS that her brother was kicking back solo. Once they were alone, she cut right to the chase, asking him what the heck he was even doing. Cayman instantly shot back that she probably wasn't worried about him anyway. She grilled him on why he hadn't told Lena about his title and just left things as they were. The second she suggested he was planning a marriage for the sword, he snapped back that he couldn't stoop that low. At first, he figured revealing who he was would put him at a disadvantage and open him up to blackmail. But the more they talked, the more he realized he needed to keep everything under wraps. Cayman crossed his arms and declared he wanted to protect Lena and Louis's desire to follow her. To Susan, that just sounded like he was scared of getting burned by a woman. She was pissed at how casually he treated the sword, the freaking symbol of the Emperor's power. Cayman explained that the marriage would mean he and Lena could co-own the sword together. Dropping that for later, She asked about how long he'd be staying in Postine. The Emperor wants to straight up absorb Poston into the Empire, so he can do whatever he wants. That sounded so insane to his sister, she was completely speechless. Still, he thought it was the right thing to do, and totally doable. She didn't buy it for a second when he said Poston was actually a good place. He added that his identity had to stay secret until the plan was done, but she shoved his hand away. Susan couldn't believe he'd pull this crap just because of some dame. Looks like Louis felt the same way about this engagement nonsense. They both couldn't believe they might soon be stuck babysitting kids. Because of that, they kept following Liana, totally stressed. While walking through the garden, she stumbled upon a neglected greenhouse. She suggested having a picnic there once, but Grandma's face just fell. Standing next to a bush, she asked Louis to turn into scissors. Susan wanted to say it was the gardener's job, but Liana was already pruning roses. She hated that the girl kept messing with stuff that wasn't her business. She couldn't believe Liana still hadn't figured out she was going to be Empress. Susan almost slipped up while arguing that she shouldn't be doing stuff like that. Lena couldn't take it anymore and called her words a bunch of pointless garbage. She was saying it's human nature to work hard so you can eat good. Lena thought the boss should work even harder than the other guys. Or so Kamina reminded her. She just blurted out that she finally understood why they fell for each other. Susan caught Liana off guard, straight up asking if she was in love with her brother. She claimed their brother's been through hell since he was a kid because of Grandpa's BS. He hated him and Reese, always yelling at them. Then later Kamena for trying to stick up for them. Kamen always looked out for his sisters and had their backs. He always tried to encourage them in whatever they were good at. Susan got all bummed out and apologized, saying she was being too emotional. Lena cheered her up, saying Kamen's gotta be happy to have such awesome sisters. After getting kicked out, even her own sisters wouldn't lift a finger to help. She figured she was on her own forever, which is why Kamen sticking up for her caught her off guard. Lena smiled and said meeting Kamen was the best thing that ever happened to her. Susan smiled back and told her to take good care of their brother. Out of nowhere, she said they were family now, and Leanna's heart just melted. The girl squeezed her hand and asked her to look out for her too. Suddenly, they both tensed up when they heard someone screaming nearby. Susan tried to find out what was going on, but they were told to stay put in the greenhouse for a while. Little did Liana know, the uninvited guest was her own damn father. Lady Aurelian was floored by their nerve, and the fact they were trying to use force. The kingdom's soldiers invading? That's basically a declaration of war, and Kamen wanted to step in. But Aurelian told him to hold up. He was acting on emotion, and she couldn't let him do that. Kamen understood where she was coming from, and just told her to be careful. That Duke Pond, ditching his own daughter because she wasn't useful, the guy just disgusted him. He knew even if Liana could forgive him, there was no way he ever could. Aurelian's grandma decided to try and settle things peacefully and invited the Duke inside. Duke Pond figured she was just some lord of bumfuck nowhere Postina, not the Empress anymore. She saw right through his attitude, but still wanted to get to the bottom of things. He said he was there to pay his respects for her taking care of his daughter. The old woman shot back that she had nothing to do with it. Liana did it all herself. Finally, she added that the girl had renounced the Pond family name. The Duke got pissed and replied that he was there to take his daughter back. Aurelian said she'd written her a pass, cause Liana had been saying for ages she wanted to travel. The guy doubted that, saying there's no way Liana would have gone that far. The lady glared daggers at him, demanding an explanation. He answered that David misses his daughter, since the so-called saint revealed her true colors. Aurelian explained that Liana might not want to be crown princess, but he felt differently. Duke Pond decided to remind her about her divorce and messed up life. Aurelian couldn't live with her kids and grandkids anymore, plus she had to put up with those scornful looks. The lady calmed down and said it's good to want the best for your kids. She suddenly chimed in that Lena looked way happier now. The lady said just because someone lives life on their own terms doesn't guarantee a happy ending. Even so, that path might be one you won't regret. She stood up and demanded he back off Liana, like a dad should. Still, the Duke figured Lena owed it to the family to dedicate her life to them. Meanwhile, the girl herself was freaking out, trying to figure things out. She was worried that if she didn't step in, her dad would go after Poston. Even worse, she was scared that Grandma Aurelian and Kamen could get hurt. Louis tried to reassure her, saying he'd protect his master. Lena laughed at him and reminded him how he used to do nothing but cry. Still, she thanked him for his support. It made things a hell of a lot easier. Before she could even finish, some random knight grabbed her. Turns out, the Duke knew all along she'd be hiding out at the Earl's castle. Susan jumped in to protect her sister-in-law, threatening him with a tribunal. The guy just egged her on, saying some small-town lord couldn't do squat. Lena cut in, calling it an invasion, but he twisted her words right away. He said, all fanatical, that they were doing it for her own good. Lena called him out on that BS, since they were only looking out for their own family. He just said that, having grown up rich, she had to repay the favor in full. She tried to say she'd already paid for everything with her shame, but the knight cut her off. He said if she actually cared about the family, she could have at least done something. Lena figured a regular employee wouldn't know anything about this kind of stuff. The next thing she knew, he was calling her a talentless hack, incapable of seducing a guy. The second those words left his mouth, Lewis's shining sword was in her hand. He said that after all the centuries he'd been around, Lena was the most amazing wielder he'd had. Lewis asked her to grip him tight, so they could kick some ass together. Lena was stunned by the support from the grumpy but honest sword. She followed his advice and realized she couldn't back down now. Hearing that crap and doing nothing? Not her style. She instantly pointed the sword at the guy. Her strikes were so precise, he actually started to wonder about her skills. She was still expertly swatting the attacker away. Looks like Lena didn't even know what was happening, seeing as she'd never picked up a sword before. Suddenly, for the first time, she understood the full power of Louis. She grinned, and Louis declared that he wouldn't let anyone who tormented his master get away with it. After those words, the girl menacingly lunged forward. She focused, getting ready to deliver the finishing blow. With unbelievable power, Lena struck the villain's sword, shattering it to pieces. She hurt the knight so badly that he ran away from her in tears. Lena immediately kissed Louis, telling him how amazing he was. She sincerely thanked him for sticking up for her, even after how she'd teased him before. Lewis just said he prefers a master who acknowledges his worth, like you do. He also mentioned he doesn't want to be used like a pair of freaking scissors. Lena saw Susan's surprise and said, "It's a long story, man." Looks like the girl was so blown away by what she saw, she couldn't even talk. Finally, her face lit up with excitement, and she begged her to do that move again. She was freaking shocked at how badass her future sister-in-law is. Lena tried to explain it was all Louis' power, but there was no stopping her. Susan asked if she could teach her how to wield a sword like that. She was so into the moment, she didn't even notice Grandma and Cayman right away. Cayman heard about the soldiers barging into the palace and came to check on him. Lena proudly held up Louis, saying he was able to protect them. Cayman was blown away that Louis could fight on his own and control the master's body. It suddenly hit him that all the legendary emperor's achievements came from the power of the self-love sword. He was also surprised to see his grandma standing off in the distance like that. Lena noticed Grandma's wandering eyes too, and asked her what she was looking at. She just grumbled, pointing out that the agave leaf was cut. That plant was super important to them, because it was used in so many things. Turns out, that plant was the only thing Aurelian took with her after the divorce. She suddenly remembered Duke Pon's threats, how he swore he'd get revenge on her. The woman yelled, ordering the butler to bring her armor and sword, now. This agave plant, it takes me back to when the emperor was all lovey-dovey, back when he first gave it to me. He called it a precious herb, said it was almost wiped out because of the war. That night, I suggested we grow agave ourselves. He just smiled and totally backed the idea. He was the fourth prince, way down the line of succession. But my help in the air battle got him the power he craved. Aurelian knew he had his flaws, but she always loved him and wanted to be with him, no matter what. And all she got in return were complaints about how she was a cold and heartless woman. She realized their promise to be together forever was officially over. I can't believe the guy who betrayed me has the nerve to blame me. Aurelian said she's going home and that she's done with this pathetic excuse for a man. He tried to stop her, reminding her she was the empress. Still, she wouldn't budge. The emperor begged her forgiveness, saying he couldn't live without her, but she never looked back. Sitting in the carriage, she realized he was the one who'd changed, not her. She felt proud, taking one last memento of their once bright love. Shaking off the memories, she said that Lena had to leave. She ordered everyone to leave, saying that after the agave was destroyed, it was her problem now. Lena tried to argue, but Cayman knew his grandma's fiery temper. He calmed her down, saying Aurelian was damn strong and dangerous when she was angry. She'd snapped a sword in half with her bare hands when she was younger, and was basically a walking natural disaster. Susan tried to figure out why Pond had come looking for Lena. Sensing danger, she asked her brother to lend her his sword, ready to send a whole lot of guys to hell. She said that both her father and her fiancé needed to pay the price. Lena said she didn't have any feelings for her fiancé. He was like a total squid. She added that she was okay, but was just causing too many problems for Poston. She knew she had to sort this out herself, since everything happening was a result of her actions. Meanwhile, Susan was just happy that their love for each other was drama-free. Lena was surprised that they were talking about love when they were on the verge of war. She said she didn't want to go back and just wanted to be with Carmen. Her words sounded so genuine, Carmen couldn't help but smile. He told her to trust him and hang tight, 'cause he's got something cooking. Once they were alone, Lena asked him if he wanted to throw down himself. She was worried the crown prince might jump in to defend the duke. Cayman hugged her and told her not to sweat it. He looked her straight in the eye and thanked her for saying she wanted to be with him. Cayman leaned in and said even if she'd said the opposite, they'd still be together. After that, he suggested they head to their separate rooms. Lena was so blown away by everything that just happened, she didn't know where to even start. Meanwhile, Crown Prince David was wallowing in sadness. Kang Sena came to talk to him, but things didn't go as she hoped. David's drunk again, passed out after another fight. This girl felt like a total sucker for falling for his BS. She was still fuming when she spotted a picture on the desk. Kang Siena froze, holding a portrait of Liena. At first, she didn't recognize the familiar face. Then it hit her. That's the villain from the novel, Duke Pon's daughter. Knowing the novel, she dumped him and crushed her before she even got started. Still, she hated that David was still hung up on her. She didn't get it, especially since Lena Pond hadn't even shown up again. It suddenly dawned on her. David could miss her, even if it wasn't in the book. That's when it hit her. This victory wasn't gonna be as easy as she thought. Sena kept telling herself, "No way, this can't be happening." But the Crown Prince's face told a different story. She couldn't believe her eyes when she saw the order on his desk. They were saying the prophecy was wrong all along. This messed with the whole story and put Kang Sena in serious danger. She crumpled the paper, fear kicking in. They could be torn apart. Duke Pon's letters about finding Liena confirmed her worst fears. She couldn't believe that wicked witch even managed to rewrite the original story. Sena decided she had to confront that sly fox before David did. That same night, Lena woke up to someone screaming about a fire. Cayman burst into the girl's room, freaked out, saying something terrible happened. Still half asleep, the girl couldn't believe what she was hearing. A fire at the farm. The second she saw the flames, she bolted towards her farm. She was staring at a raging inferno, not knowing if her calves and chicks made it out. Lena wanted to run straight into the fire, but someone stopped her. She couldn't let the farm she'd cared for all these years burn to the ground. Cayman told her to get a grip, saying other people could get hurt. She agreed and suggested they put out the fire before it spread to the village. She ordered them to get water from the nearest well and bring as much as they could. The villagers immediately started fighting the fire on the girl's farm. Even Cayman was hauling buckets and fighting the fire like a man possessed. After a while, everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they saw the fire die down. Luckily, they managed to save the grape harvest, but the watermelon fields were completely wiped out. Cayman sadly hugged her and told her it was okay to cry if she was hurting inside. The girl clung to him, but she felt like she couldn't even shed a tear. Suddenly, she overheard some people talking about a guy in weird clothes, pouring oil all over the field. Everyone knew it was arson. Lena froze up and said that her father might have done it. Cayman knew it was true, and he looked at her with pain in his eyes. Lena declared that she couldn't take it anymore and was going to get an apology from her father. She thought he'd try to stop her, but the idea never even crossed his mind. He vowed he'd catch the perp and make him apologize, groveling at her feet. That same night, he contacted Reese and told her to send out the engagement announcement to the kingdom. He also said to announce Poston's annexation, then send the border patrol troops here. Reese was surprised, guessing he wanted to lower the enemy's morale by drawing out Earl Russell. She immediately started calculating all the possible scenarios. Reese understood that they'd have to take control of the surrounding territories. The girl figured there had to be a damn good reason for all this. He gave her a heavy look and said he'd seen something way too messed up. Looks like he spooked Reese, which made her jump right into action. He also ordered the knights to get their squads ready outside. Ancor warned him that entering the kingdom without permission could land him in deep trouble. Still, he was prepared for it. Duke Pond had crossed the line. Cayman never wanted to see that sad look on Liena's face again. Even as emperor, he couldn't let her efforts be taken lightly. Just then, Louis appeared behind him, offering his power for Liena's sake. Louis excused himself, saying he wasn't betraying her, just forming a temporary alliance. Cayman couldn't make out the sword's words, but he figured it was asking him to take it. As soon as he gripped it, the sword instantly adjusted to the size of his hand. Ancor immediately guessed that the sword of self-esteem had recognized him. Still, Cayman knew the dude was just borrowing power for Liena's sake. Right then, Duke Pond's voice boomed from behind him, calling out for Lena. He thanked the sword for saving him the trouble of having to look for it. The guy kept threatening Lena, demanding she come out to him. Cayman stepped up and said that after what he pulled, Lena went to defend her lands. He blindsided the Duke with the insane number of soldiers in the village. The guy totally wasn't expecting that. Cayman warned him that messing with a former empress and territorial integrity wouldn't fly. He let out a war cry and ordered everyone who resisted to be killed. Duke Pond realized these knights were definitely from the Empire. Knowing he couldn't win this fight, he tried to bolt. He didn't even take a step before Susan's foot slammed him into the dirt. The Duke didn't recognize her and figured she was just some servant girl. Susan introduced herself as a princess of the Empire, and that's when it clicked for the Duke. Carmen shoved a sword to his head, saying he despised him. He smirked, all smug, and said it was a real honor to meet his future father-in-law. Meanwhile, Liena was checking out the damage done to the field. She touched the ground and accidentally noticed oil on the surface. Suddenly, it hit her. They were trying to torch the place, and she could have died. She couldn't believe her own father would go this far. Lena tensed up when she heard her father's voice outside. She thought he'd brought soldiers again, but saw him on his knees instead. Cayman towered over him, announcing that he'd kept his promise. The Duke started begging her forgiveness, saying he did everything for her own good. Lena was furious that he burned everything she loved and dared to say that. She told him that even if she beat him, it wouldn't bring back her field. The girl apologized to Cayman, thinking her apology would lighten his heart. She smiled sadly, realizing that wasn't what she wanted. Cayman squeezed her hands and said he was ready to do anything to cheer her up. Duke Pond was shaking, not believing Lena was in a relationship with the Emperor himself. Lena didn't know what to say since he was still her father. Out of nowhere, she turns around and says she never wants to see that guy again. The second those words left her mouth, the Emperor locked eyes with Pond. He told him to never show his face again, or his life would be in danger. Duke Pond promised he'd stay away, and they dragged him off. Even though Lena got a half-assed apology, she still felt empty inside. She thanked Cayman, saying without him, she wouldn't have even gotten that. The girl also thanked her trusty sword, Louis. She smiled, pointing out that they must be pretty tight to come help together. Cayman also thanked the sword for lending its power. Lena suddenly noticed that Louis had gotten bigger today. As they walked through the field, they started talking about their losses. Cayman was bummed to hear that Liena's entire delicious watermelon patch was wiped out. The girl scratched her head and said, "There are years with good harvests and bad ones." She tied her hair back tight and added that times like these mean you don't give up, you start over. Just then, Cayman noticed she wasn't the elegant lady her father described. Even so, she was glad she turned out the way she did. Cayman watched the optimistic girl with a smile. He kissed her hand and said he respected her for living honestly. Even with all the hardships, the Emperor reminded her he wanted to tell her something after they were done here. She guessed he was talking about her younger sisters, but that wasn't it. This was it. Cayman was finally gonna come clean about who he really was. He was about to say the magic words, but Susan totally shouted over him. The girl just jumped in and started wiping soot off Lena. Lena finally realized how she looked the whole time, and got super embarrassed, saying they should talk later. She bolted out of there so fast, Cayman couldn't even get a word in. He spent the rest of the time totally pissed that Susan ruined the moment. Grandma Aurelian and a cup of tea interrupted his grumbling. He noticed a jar with some ingredients she tossed in. Turns out, Lena had been cooking it all day for everyone, since it's good for your lungs. Out of nowhere, Aurelian asked him what he was planning to do about the Duke. He said he'd let everyone know the Duke was heading to the Empire for their wedding, which basically means he ain't coming back to the kingdom. That way, Aurelian gets to do whatever he wants with him. Turns out, Cayman locked him up in Poston, but everyone else will think he's at the wedding. If things were different, the kingdom would have thrown a fit if the Emperor offed him. But this way, nobody'll know. She gave her grandson props. Then he dropped another bomb on her. Grandma also wanted to know if the Pride Sword actually recognized him. Cayman was against it, but she had a feeling the sword might have accepted him as its master. She smiled, happy everything went down exactly how he planned. But get this, she was shocked when he said it ain't over yet. She knew right away that he still hadn't revealed who he really was. Granny Aurelian started chewing him out for being too soft. Meanwhile, Kang Saina was already on her way to Poston. She gazed thoughtfully at Lord Aurelian's palace. As she got closer to her destination, a sinister smile crept across her face. The next morning, Lena, Cayman, and Aurelian started checking the agave plant. Lena studied it closely, noticing it had started to seep and sprout a stalk after the fire. By this point, she'd become a real agave expert. She figured the little guy wanted to show Aurelian its flower one last time. Lena added some gossip about wishing upon seeing the precious flower. She glanced at Aurelian, relieved she wasn't upset. The lady was super stoked that the flower could give such a gift. Her reaction showed Lena that as long as you're breathing, you can heal and move on. She smiled and told the girl to check on the flower every day. Lena suddenly decided that when the agave bloomed, she'd wish to be happy with Common. It was like he read her mind, and he answered with a gentle smile. His attention flustered her, but he just said she was really cute. He was digging the girl in the straw hat and gardening gloves. He suddenly pulled her closer, saying he really liked this version of Lena. Aurelian suddenly chimed in that they should maybe chill a bit in front of Grandma. Before she left, she was like, "Hurry up and get married, then pop out a kid." Even though it was a joke, Lena totally ate up Cayman's confused reaction. Their chill time got wrecked when the butler announced a guest was here. Lena couldn't believe her eyes when Kang Sena walked in. She noticed the girl hadn't gotten any better since becoming a princess. Turns out, she came specifically to meet with Liana. She figured Saina was probably there to beg her to turn down David's proposal. Still, she definitely didn't expect her to show up without any guards. Cayman started freaking out, thinking this was gonna ruin her mood. Lena decided it was best to just hash everything out face to face. She suddenly realized she needed to change before the meeting. Cayman gave her a soft smile when she said she'd take care of things and be back. Still, he respected her strength, but he just didn't want to see her get hurt. He knew about Kang Sane and the prophecy where she was the saint. Everyone saw her as a deity who would bring prosperity to the kingdom. The king's people believed the kingdom was about to rise, while the empire would decline after losing the sword. He was filled with rage, thinking about their arrogance. Marrying the saint helped control the people, which pointed to superstitious propaganda. It pained him to think of Liana suffering under hundreds of eyes. He changed into a servant's coat, deciding he'd help Lena. Cayman wasn't about to let this woman mess with her again, so he decided to go undercover and figure out what she was really up to. The second Sane walked inside, she started complaining about everything. Common was positive she didn't recognize him, but as if she read his mind, she locked eyes with him, real intense. Then, bold as brass, she grabbed his arm and asked him what he was doing there. Cayman yanked his hand away, telling her she had the wrong guy. Still, those golden locks and blue eyes looked pretty damn familiar to her. She whispered, telling him to drop the act and that he was the emperor. He couldn't believe she recognized him without ever even meeting him before. He suggested they move to the living room, hinting at a longer chat. Right then and there, Sina just flat out said she needed to talk to him, then asked what he was doing there. She was sure he'd show up in the sequel, but everything changed. The girl wondered aloud if this was really Cayman. The guy immediately guessed that even though she knew of him, she didn't know what he looked like. To his surprise, she pinned him against the wall and asked why he went quiet. She figured he was falling for her, since he had to be into shameless and forward women. He suddenly felt a sting of anger and admitted she was right. Still, he didn't like girls like her. He liked girls like Lena. He was disgusted by his arrogant look, like he was so sure everyone would fall for him. He couldn't wrap his head around how someone could cause that much trouble without even meaning to. Cayman shook her hand off and told her to get lost, saying her being there was making him sick. The girl couldn't believe he was just blowing her off like that. His face twisted with fury, and threats were practically bubbling out of his mouth. But then, Liana stopped him dead in his tracks, totally shocked to see the two of them together. Before meeting up, she decided she'd just wear her normal clothes. She had no idea what might go down, so she brought Louis along. Out of nowhere, Lena started scolding the sword for not wanting to come with her. She suddenly asked how he was doing, since he was still crying. She tried to get him to open up, saying she wanted to be a source of strength for him, just like he was for her. The sword almost cried, feeling her genuine support. It apologized for betraying its master. Still, Liana wasn't mad and ordered it to turn into a dagger. She totally wasn't expecting to find Kong Sena with Cayman. The guy rushed over to her, saying it was all a misunderstanding. Sena ripped into her, saying she should have come later and not interrupted. The girl shot back that she hasn't changed a bit and still blames everyone else. Kang Sena was no longer considered a saint or blessed with divine power. She figured Liana was just trying to get under her skin and provoke her. The princess demanded an apology for Liana daring to hit on her husband. The girl shot back that she was the one who just pinned her fiancé against the wall. Sienna thought Lena was trying to seduce her man because David made the Duke bring her. Cayman explained that he bailed the second he heard about their engagement. Looks like his words were the only thing that made her realize Lena wasn't interested in David. The princess suddenly covered her face hysterically and burst out laughing. She asked, totally disbelieving, if they were really engaged. The girl said she didn't quite believe it, but she'd take that answer. She then rudely added that they should hurry up and get her a room. The princess sprawled out on the sofa and said she didn't want to go back to the capital just yet. She was so infuriating that Lena was struggling to hold herself back. What also pissed her off was that this woman kept flirting with Cayman. She answered with fake annoyance that she couldn't rent a room since she wasn't the estate owner. Sina demanded they ask the owner, but Cayman just told her to get lost. She called him out for how he was treating her and ordered him to fetch the lord. But the next thing she knew, they were being told to throw her off the property. Lena smiled at her grandma, happy to see how quickly she stepped in. Kang Sena couldn't believe she'd been treated like that and demanded justice. Aurelian just coldly said that they shouldn't put up with this chick's antics. Lena immediately snapped back, wanting to know about that incident by the wall. Cayman said he was pretending to be a servant to find out what the woman was up to. At one point, she said his name and started firing off questions. He was just as clueless about how she even knew him, which led to this whole mess. Lena froze, realizing she'd grabbed him, and started rambling about the original story and a sequel. She knew the plot of the novel she was stuck in. In it, Lena bullied Sina because she was a total eyesore. What weirded her out was the story ended with a wedding and a happily ever after. Suddenly, she guessed there was a part 2, with Cayman as the main character. She figured again that there's no way you could miss a hottie like him. Now she got why Kang Sena was so pissed, thinking she should be with the main dude. She instantly panicked that Cayman might have felt her heart skip a beat. She dreaded the thought of him actually liking Kang Sena. It stung Lena to think all their history could vanish over a few lines. She started worrying Cayman might just dump her ass. I guess he saw her freaking out and said he wouldn't screw up again. He stroked her hair and told her to wipe that frown off her face. She begged him not to show her any interest, even if he felt something. Cayman was stoked she was jealous, but Lena saw it differently. He suddenly apologized and promised he wouldn't let things get like that again. Lena couldn't figure out why he was acting so cold, even with that smile. Back in his office, Cayman noticed Sena was still standing by the gate. He couldn't stop replaying that scene in the living room. Lena's words just kept bouncing around in his head. What bugged him was how weird both those girls reacted. They were both thinking he was definitely going to be interested in Kang Sane. He was also thrown off by Sane talking about the original, so he decided to dig deeper. In the novel, Sane was supposed to get caught in a love triangle after finding the Pride Sword. Even after months, the possibility of Cayman showing up still haunted her. She suddenly figured maybe things would go smooth if she could just find that Pride Sword. Thing is, she still had no clue how she was going to get her hands on it. These thoughts were seriously messing with her head. She tossed and turned, totally frustrated, trying to figure out how to find something she'd never even seen. Sina blamed the writer for Cayman still not showing up, and for her relationship with David going south. The maids kept trying to calm her down, making excuses about how busy David was. They also tried to get it through her head that a lady of her status shouldn't be begging for a necklace. Sina suddenly shot up and told them not to worry. She proudly declared that he was acting like this because he had no competition. The girl was certain that everything would work itself out eventually. She was chilling, enjoying her main character perks, and confident she'd win. Even then, sitting in the carriage, she was happy she'd come. Found Cayman instead of just a portrait. She was positive he was totally gonna fall for her. She was picturing him completely falling head over heels for the main girl. A maid interrupted her thoughts, saying it was best to rest here since it was so dark out. No way was the crown princess gonna sleep in a carriage. On top of that, they even refused her food and soft bread. The maid explained that the city was super wary of outsiders right now because of the fire. The woman looked like she was already sick of Sena's constant demands. Right from the start, she demanded that she cut ties with Lady Pond. At first, she was cautious, but soon she believed in the lady's gift and followed her. Now she was trying to force her to go to the capital, hinting that Lady Pond might go to David. All she said in response was that he'd be crawling back to her soon enough when a rival shows up. The maid was getting seriously worried about Sena's sanity. Girl was living in a fantasy, waiting for scenes from the novel to play out. She was screaming so loud inside the gazebo that Anchor found them. Kang Sena immediately checked out the stern-looking dude with admiration. She couldn't believe her eyes, seeing the Lord Anchor himself. He locked eyes with her, giving her the creeps. Sina instantly played the innocent, saying she'd seen him in her dreams. The guy cut to the chase, asking if she knew where he was headed. The girl confidently said he was going to the capital to find the ego sword. Even though he was looking for the sword, something still felt off to him. Not long before this, the Emperor personally requested that I investigate this woman's case. He wanted me to act like she was right no matter what, just to get a better read on her. Angkor immediately feigned surprise and decided to play into her ego. He was taken aback when she casually mentioned that she'd been reading for a long time. He questioned her, and she told him he'd need to hang around the kingdom for about 3 months. Angkor was surprised when she brought up Douglas Marshall, the emperor's uncle. That made him think that maybe she really could see the future. Kang Sena proudly stated that she could solve the problem by mastering the sword of self-love. Angkor figured her knowledge was pretty superficial, so she probably had a spy inside the empire. Her words made him wonder if the kingdom had somehow found out that Liena was a sword master. He decided to test the waters and said the emperor had already found traces of the sword. The girl couldn't believe her ears when he added that he'd have to return to the empire soon. Sena immediately started talking about how the story still wasn't solved. She understood how screwed she was, considering she hadn't lit a fire under David or Cayman yet. After a quick think, she laid out her request. The next morning, Cayman was weirded out, because his ear had been itching like crazy since yesterday. Lena guessed it was from soot, but he shot that idea down. Suddenly, the girl snuggled up to him with a smile and said she'd clean his ears for him. Aurelian teased them, saying they should just kiss already, seeing as they were both adults. She decided to hint that they shouldn't hold their breath, waiting for the dumbass who can't talk. She roasted Cayman for yakking about the wedding like a parrot, but with 0 ring or flowers. After completely demolishing her grandson in that argument, she bounced to the greenhouse. Lena decided to tag along, and Cayman felt the urge to follow too. He barely even opened his mouth to say he wanted to go when they shut him down hard. Once Liena was gone, Aurelian ordered him to seriously think about revealing his identity. It suddenly hit him that he'd only ever proposed with words, nothing else. If he'd known Susan was coming, he would have had her bring the accessories. He still figured he should get the proposal ready first, then drop the big reveal. He was immediately distracted when Anchor showed up. Cayman asked if that woman had left for the capital, but Anchor's answer was complicated. The Emperor froze when he heard she'd asked to be taken to the Empire. He couldn't wrap his head around what she was trying to pull. Angkor replayed their conversation, still trying to figure it all out. She begged for it so fiercely, he couldn't help but be stunned. Even her maid looked like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Sina straight up said she needed to charm Cayman right there in the Empire. Angkor was so blown away by her sheer stupidity and audacity, he was speechless. He pointed out her future sight was bogus, since she knew nothing about the Master Swordsman. He also brought up her talk about history going down the wrong path. Cayman suddenly remembered her calling him the hero of some novel. He figured she'd seen a future where she overthrew Lena and took the sword for herself. But then it hit him. Maybe she doesn't even know about Lena. He ordered Anchor to let her know her request had been granted. The guy knew this could stir up trouble, start rumors flying. Kalman reminded him that she showed up with a handmaiden, which meant the maid could vouch for Khan being in the Empire of her own free will. They decided they'd lay it all out for the maid right then and there. Even though she followed her to Postine, she could still get the axe for being Sena's accomplice in treason. Their hope was she'd get back to the palace somehow and spill the beans. Now they had to figure out who was going to take on that job. Angkor knew the second he laid eyes on it. This was his destiny. Meanwhile, Aurelian was giving Liane a crash course in family life wisdom. Despite everything she said, Liane could sense the sincerity in Kamene's feelings. She tried arguing it was better than jewels and flowers, but the woman wasn't buying it. What hit her was that Aurelian was talking about a lot of stuff from first-hand experience. Liane figured she'd also do whatever it took for her husband. The woman shot back that her mistake was not being tough enough on her husband's screw-ups from the start. She suddenly added that even flaws that seem cute can wreck a marriage. Even so, Liane still thought a wife's job was to fix her husband's flaws. They noticed that the agave plant was growing really well. The second she joked the agave might hit the ceiling, the old lady suggested tearing off the roof. Lena remembered that plant was the only thing that survived the divorce. She wondered if her grandma thought about her ex-husband when she looked at that agave. She couldn't understand her grandma's feelings, but she could tell the old lady still loved him. Lena started wondering if she could ever love someone that deeply, for that long. She immediately shut her eyes, deciding she wanted to pass that feeling on to Cayman. After that, she decided to just get to work like always. She was surprised Louis didn't respond to her battle cry at all. It seemed to her like Louis might be going through puberty, which would explain his crazy emotions. The second he opened his mouth, she straight up asked him about his feelings. Lena was there for him, telling him she was ready to listen. He blurted out that someone else might say they wanted him. Suddenly, she figured he might be worried about Kang Sane, sensing a similar vibe to Liena. The girl told him not to sweat it, adding that she wasn't giving him up to anyone. Louis suddenly remembered Cayman's warm hands and cursed himself for even thinking about leaving Lena. Even so, Lena replied he was the best, as far as she was concerned. Louis said her kindness was only making his guilt even worse. The girl's mood instantly shifted, and she told him he needed some hard labor. The sword got spooked when she casually mentioned how she'd use it. She ordered it to turn into a plow, so she could till the field today. Louis couldn't hide his disgust when she scraped the mud off him. Lena knew she needed to get this whole thing sorted out as soon as possible. They use different oil in this world, so the soil impact isn't as bad. Finally, they actually managed to make things a little better. Susan immediately called it a good fun workout. Lena said she still had some work to do and asked for help. Meanwhile, the maid was begging Khan Sayena to come back. She tried to talk her out of going to the Empire, but it was no use. Relations between the kingdom and the Empire are terrible, so her plans could easily fall apart. Sayena just replied that the Emperor wants her to return with him. Angkor showed up at dawn with Cayman's orders for her. He said she needed to be at the Lord's Castle training grounds before noon. The maid could barely believe it, seeing as Sayena hadn't even met the Emperor. Still, the princess was sure things were finally about to kick off in the Empire. She figured Cayman would fall head over heels after he got his hands on that sword. With that, she took off, moving faster than the maid had ever seen. The maid just didn't get why she'd ditch her fortune and power for some empire. She even texted David saying she was taking a quick trip to the shrine. David tossed the message, feeling a headache coming on just from her handwriting. Plus, he was getting a bad feeling from the Duke Pawn's radio silence. He figured Lena might be hurting too, and he'd need to comfort her. David suddenly realized that compared to Sayena, her little huff was kinda cute. When he first laid eyes on her, she seemed more like a houseplant. He couldn't figure out why they sent him the redhead in the first place. Even though he wasn't thrilled, he needed Duke Pawn's clout. That day, Lena thanked him for choosing her of all people. He was taken aback by the sincerity of someone he didn't even want around. Her cheeks flushed a soft pink, and her face bloomed into a smile. Thinking about her, he secretly hoped she'd show up soon. David guessed that this woman, with her genuine heart, would never ditch him. Still, his worried assistant came running to him right away. A territorial change notice just arrived from the Empire, sealed by the Emperor himself. Rumor has it, Lady Aurelian decided to give Poston back to the Empire before she died. Poston originally belonged to the Empire, but Aurelian chose to stay in the kingdom after the divorce. So nobody can stop it from going back to the Empire now. This also means Aurelian didn't completely cut ties with the Empire. On top of that, there's also a notice about an engagement. This didn't make sense to David, since the Emperor doesn't need permission to get married. He suddenly figured the future Empress might be from their kingdom. At first, David thought this woman just happened to share a name with his future wife. My guy just dropped a bomb. Lena Pond's engaged to the Emperor. David thought he was tripping, 'cause Duke Pond was supposed to bring her back. He knew that sneaky bastard would never give up the chance to be Queen's dad. The Duke wouldn't pass up that kind of power, knowing what it could bring him. The aide said he couldn't believe it either, until he saw the letter. It spelled out all the Duke's dirty deeds and begged the Empire to step in. On top of that, Pond screwed over the prince, greenlighting Lena's marriage to the Emperor. David crushed the letter, pissed and feeling like he'd lost. He ordered the troops to Poston, but it was a no-go. The aide figured Lena was probably already out of the country, thanks to the Empire's teleport network. David was even more pissed off because there was no way he was going to let that happen. Meanwhile, the Emperor was soaking up the rustic charm of the countryside. Watching the people work, his heart filled with a sense of peace. He knew the country ran on the backs of countless folks, but seeing it firsthand hit different. Before this, he hadn't truly appreciated the value of their labor. A little girl ran up to him and asked if he was looking for her sister, Lena. He immediately said he was looking for Susan, and she told him she was at Lena's house. He was blown away that Susan had been out in the fields working since morning. Cayman thanked her for her help and pointed to her mom calling her over. The girl took off, waving and giving him a warm smile. Cayman just smiled back, already trying to lock this moment away in his heart. Being emperor and all, he swore he'd never forget how much the little things matter. With that simple truth hitting home, he headed over to Lena. She froze the second she heard that familiar voice. The girl immediately told him to wait. Don't come in. A couple of minutes later, she finally appeared in the doorway, saying he could come in now. He was instantly like, "What were you doing in there?" He was beyond shocked when she held out a bouquet and asked him to marry her. She added that she'd take care of him and offered them a long, happy life full of love. Cayman was so blown away by her confession, he was completely speechless. She also mentioned she'd fixed up her place so they could live there together. Susan was going to crack a joke, but was shocked when he actually took the flowers. He smiled gently and said he'd keep counting on her. Cayman immediately said he loved picturing their future life together. Lena instantly whipped out a prenuptial agreement. Cayman was floored that Leanna proposed and already drafted a prenup. He immediately thought about speeding up border negotiations for sweet and hardworking Lena. Even the sword was probably wondering when this idiot would reveal his true identity. Cayman asked Susan to send a message to the priest. The girl couldn't believe he wanted to get married right there in Postine. The emperor knew Poston didn't do things this way, but he wanted to make memories. That's when Susan realized he was truly blinded by love. In Postine, they didn't have weddings. They just prettied up the house for the newlyweds. After that, they proposed and signed the prenuptial agreement. Cayman said he wished he could start living with her right now, but it'll take time to move his stuff. Lena was blown away that he'd even hold a wedding ceremony with a priest. The next day, she was shocked when a flag was raised above her. She tried to find out what was going on, but the knight almost called her Your Highness. Lena couldn't believe Poston had become imperial territory so fast. Right away, she started thinking about needing a new business plan. Louise was ragging on her for constantly obsessing about farming. Everyone was waiting for her in the greenhouse. The agave flower had finally bloomed. They were all blown away by how gorgeous it looked. She immediately told everyone to join hands and make a wish. Lena silently wished that she and Cayman would be happy every single day. She glanced at him, hoping they'd see this beautiful flower together again, years from now. Feeling a little flustered, she decided to ask Cayman what he wished for. To her surprise, he wished for the exact same thing she did. She asked Aurelian to make a wish, but she said she didn't need to. The woman looked at the lovely couple and said all her wishes had already come true. Aurelian smirked as Lena gave her a surprised look. Susan came over, asking if there was any shovel work today. Lena smiled and said they were checking the beehives in the woods today. She added that they even make their own honey. They finally understood why Leanna makes so many sweets despite the cost of sugar. The girl immediately got psyched for work and was ready to head out. Cayman didn't want her to go alone and decided to tag along. Lena explained she specifically picked a spot far from Poston's land to avoid needing permission. She added that next season, she wants to move the hives closer to the fields. Lena was stoked he hadn't noticed she was breaking the law. On the way to the woods, Lena asked Louis about his wish. She tried to get him to open up, but he didn't want to explain. Finally, he said, all embarrassed, that he wished he and Master would be happy together for a real long time. Lena tried to hide her own blush and decided she'd make the same wish. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the rock in front of her and tripped. Lena got spooked, feeling the ground disappear beneath her feet. Before she could fall, Cayman caught her just in time. The Emperor set her down and suggested they hold hands. The girl was surprised when he said he was ready to carry her. Louis tried to slip away, then said he wanted to give them both a chance to be alone. Cayman didn't catch what he said, but figured he just wanted some alone time with Leanna. No sooner did the girl remind him of his own words than Cayman offered to carry him, which totally psyched Louis out. Louis hated himself for even thinking about Cayman hugging him and ran off, feeling like a total scumbag. He was crying so hard, even Leanna couldn't make out a word he was saying. Cayman decided to try and calm him down by talking to him. He said he wanted to carry him instead of Lena, since he'd always been loyal to his master. His words stirred up some fresh temptation in the sword, making him run even further, hating himself for it. Lena guessed he was just going through some kind of teenage angst. Louis couldn't wrap his head around why this amazing guy became emperor right now. When Cayman picked him up, he remembered all over again what it meant to be alive and be a sword. That's when Louis started wondering if Cayman could actually become his master. He forced himself to stop thinking like that, because he can't betray Leanna. Cayman noticed Lena was worried and suggested she have a private word with Louis. The girl immediately went over to the sword and asked how he was doing. The sword averted his gaze and said he was disgusted with himself. Lena backed him up, saying he'd be able to get through this. Louis immediately snapped at her, saying he was the best damn sword there is. He told her about all the hard work that goes into forging the perfect blade. Lena guessed that it took a whole lot of hammer strikes to make him. Louis said that even after all that, they just hung him on the wall, not realizing his worth. Lena got bummed out, because they were just straight up ignoring him. He added that's why he hid what he really was and bounced around the world. His words suddenly made her wonder if she even knew what he was worth. Louis wanted to say he'd finally found someone who got him, but he clammed up. He ducked into the bushes, too chicken to spill his guts. Cayman noticed she was alone, and she filled him in on their chat. He pointed out Louis had been acting weird ever since he went with him to protect her from the Duke. Lena suddenly guessed that maybe his feelings had shifted. They froze when they heard a loud scream. Cayman jumped up, saying that could be a monster. They heard this freaky voice coming right out of the sky. Turns out, the monster tried to snatch Louis, clamping him right in its jaws. Lena pointed at that massive bird and yelled that it had kidnapped Louis. The girl bolted straight toward the monster, wanting to protect her precious sword. After a while, they finally tracked down the bird thief. It had been circling in the sky for so long that Louis was feeling sick. Cayman decided to be the bait and ordered her to run when the bird dropped the sword. She tried to stop him, but he was already set on rescuing Louis. He leaped forward, drawing the bird's attention like a magnet. Looks like he got what he wanted, and it finally opened its beak. The guy saw his chance and went for Louis. She screamed like crazy and tossed Louis, who was already dizzy as hell. Cayman figured he'd grab Louis at any cost and chuck him to Lena. The girl immediately ran for the sword, but the bird locked onto Cayman. She held Louis tight, all worried, and asked how he was doing. Next thing she knew, a massive monster paw was coming right at Louis. She yelled bloody murder when she saw the bird slam Cayman straight into the ground. Lena was so stunned, she was totally frozen in place. She begged Louis to lend her his power to help her save Cayman. Louis refused, saying it was way too dangerous right now, and she could get hurt. The girl was like, "No way, we can't let Cayman die." Then an idea popped into her head, and she apologized to Louis right after. She chucked the sword at Cayman with all her might, so Louis could transfer his power. Cayman was sitting there on the ground, clueless about how they'd get out of this mess. He was totally surprised to see the pride sword lying next to him. Louis was dizzy again after being dumped like that. Again. Lena yelled at the top of her lungs for Louis to merge with Cayman. Again. She added that Cayman was the key to unlocking his true potential. The Emperor smirked and begged Louis for help. Again. The sword whined, shocked once more by just how amazing his master was. Cayman finally heard Louis' voice and grabbed him tight. He expertly aimed his hand, ready to deliver the final blow. Louis was so in sync with him, they were practically one machine. In the next instant, he obliterated the monster with a single strike. His movements were so precise, even he was surprised by the sword's power. Once the bird hit the ground, he could finally breathe. Lena immediately gushed, saying they took down that monster in one hit. She smiled, saying they were like a single unified being. She said that Louis had finally found someone who appreciates him as a sword. She asked him to tell her honestly what he wanted to say, but was too afraid to. Right then and there, Louis confessed he wanted to become Cayman's sword. Lena snapped at him for not telling her sooner and making her sweat it out. Louis defended himself, saying he'd never wanted to serve two people at once before. She leaned in and said she couldn't even hold a candle to Cayman the swordsman. Lena added that a sword as badass as him belonged with a worthy wielder. The girl said she was ready to step aside for whoever could unlock his full potential. Louis just replied that she was the best he'd ever met, and he'd defend her till his last breath. Cayman asked if that meant he was acknowledged as the master, but Louis shot him down. He suddenly asked if he'd still need Lena after he became the sword. Louis asked him which was more important, his goal or Lena. Lena ripped into him for being sneaky, but Louis needed to know. The girl's face fell. She knew he had a point. The same question had crossed her mind too, but she'd been avoiding it ever since getting close to Cayman. She knew it could hurt her worse than David cheating on her. Lena broke down crying, not wanting to hear that from Cayman. Suddenly, she asked why she had to choose just one thing. Louis immediately got bummed out, saying she'd gotten the wrong idea. She wiped her face when Cayman hugged her, ready to give his answer. The Emperor said he'd always respect Lena, and that she was his top priority. He really wanted the sword at first, but now he realized his path had been leading him to Lena all along. The guy said without a doubt that he couldn't live without her soul. He wiped away her tears and told her he'd do anything for her. Looks like Louis was pretty happy with that answer. He stood up and decided to introduce himself to Cayman, just like he did with Lena at first. Louis said the contract was sealed and asked him to take it. He shifted into a different form and promised to do everything he could to make him proud to be his master. Louis added that he wouldn't forgive him if he betrayed Lena. Lena smiled and said she was starting to feel like a fifth wheel. They both replied that she was their #1 priority and then headed off to get the honey. The girl smiled and pointed them towards the boxes where the bees lived. She told them to back off since she didn't have a hazmat suit. She was stoked that there was way more honey this year than last. She dug how attentively Cayman was listening to her. She realized she forgot the container and looked at Louis, but he couldn't stand sticky stuff. Lena said he'd have to eat it right there and then. Cayman wandered off, saying he'd check out the area. The second he was gone, Lena let out this evil laugh. She was thrilled she was finally alone with Louis. She squeezed him menacingly and called him a nagging mother-in-law in sword form. Lena said his questions made her burst into tears and say all sorts of embarrassing things to Cayman. She suddenly remembered him saying that his soul couldn't live without her. The girl immediately blurted out how happy that made her, which totally surprised Louis. She let him go and thanked him for letting her hear Cayman's true feelings. The second he asked if she'd regret it, she was all over him. She yelled that she loved Cayman and would always cherish her love for him. Louis reluctantly agreed with her, but told her not to blame him later. They barely sorted things out when Cayman came back and said there were no monsters. She didn't have a knife, so the honey splattered all over her hand. Cayman suddenly said not to waste the precious honey and started licking it off her hand. Lena tried to stop him, but he kept kissing her fingers. Looks like he's just as flustered as Lena doing this. Right then, she remembered again how damn tempting he could be. She froze, blushing, as his face got closer and closer. They were about to kiss, but Louis interrupted to say the sun was setting. The newlyweds jumped apart, trying to hide how embarrassed they were. Lena remembered they couldn't go back empty-handed. Grandma was waiting for them. She was surprised when Cayman said they were going to their house. Cayman confessed he'd managed to fix up the place a bit while she was living at the castle. He just lit up the whole room, showing some real emotion. Lena was gonna wait to start their life together after the wedding, but she couldn't resist the temptation. On the way home, she just couldn't believe this guy almost gave her a heart attack, like multiple times in one day. The second she saw her place, she was like, "Am I dreaming or what?" This house was so different from before. She had to rub her eyes to believe it. Cayman chirped up all happy, saying the house had been slightly changed. The girl was floored when she saw that even the inside of the whole house was different. He'd redone everything, including the living room, kitchen, and bathroom. It suddenly hit Lena that he hadn't just moved in. He'd hired construction workers. Then, Cayman casually admitted he'd picked out a bigger bed for them. Her face went bright red when he added it had to be bigger for the both of them. She told him to forget about the bed and just take a shower, but that just made things even more awkward. Cayman told her to wash up first while he went to get some firewood. As night fell, he said he'd leave right after she fell asleep. He even found a spot for Louis so he could guard his mistress. Lena turned away because she thought tonight was going to be their wedding night. Her heart was pounding so hard, she couldn't handle all the feels. She wanted to tell him to come to bed too, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Louis figured she was asleep and decided to ask Cayman something. She barely contained her surprise when he asked what he liked about her. He asked him to honestly admit when exactly he fell in love with Lena. Louis said he couldn't stand seeing him unable to confess his feelings to her. Cayman got all bummed out, saying he wasn't sure how deep Leanna's feelings really were. The girl was practically jumping for joy, thinking he was trying to find out if she loved him. Out of nowhere, Louis called him a whiner and said that wasn't what he expected to hear. Cayman asked him if he was even sure that Leanna loved him for him, and not just because he could transform into tools. Suddenly, Louis said he'd never doubted her feelings, not even for a second. Her requests threw him for a loop, but he was still down to do whatever she wanted. Cayman agreed, telling him he really was a total pushover. He begged Louis to believe that he genuinely loved Lena. The girl was watching him, totally mesmerized, feeling like her heart was about to explode. Louis told him that's something he should be saying to the person standing right behind him. Their eyes locked the second Cayman realized she'd heard everything. Lena felt like she wanted to give him the same confidence he'd once given her. She wanted to give him all the feelings that were fluttering in her chest. The girl stood up and said she loved him more than anyone in the world. Cayman suddenly asked what she'd say if he was a completely different person. She immediately started freaking out, wondering if he'd become some kind of gangster. After getting a no, she said that no matter what, he'd still be Cayman. Looks like he'd finally heard what he'd needed to hear for so long. He hugged her tight and confessed he loved her so much. He was afraid to tell the truth. Lena smiled and told him not to do anything and to just love her. She snuggled up to him, telling him to never change who he really is. Cayman pulled back, stroked her face, and swore he wouldn't, promising he'd never hurt her. He locked his lips onto hers in a burning kiss. Lena was so overwhelmed by these feelings, she couldn't fight them. Finally, they gently broke apart, savoring the moment. Cayman's eyes showed a consuming love for the girl. Louis tactfully pointed out that while they were happy about the first night, they should cool it a little. He added that he needed to mentally prepare too, since he wasn't ready to let the mistress get married. Cayman pressed against her from behind, saying he regretted putting Louis's spot so close. He whispered that he'd move him to the living room tomorrow. After that, they just casually said goodnight to each other. The next morning, Cayman's uncle showed up at the residence. The guy was pissed that Cayman hadn't even bothered to meet with him. Douglas Marshall protested, saying he was family, not some stranger. He was offended he only found out about the wedding in the damn papers. Reese realized he was there to make trouble about the marriage. Now he was second in line for the throne, and an heir was a threat. Reese put him in his place, saying he couldn't just barge in demanding things. Douglas argued, saying it was wrong to marry someone from another kingdom. Reese snapped back that he had no right to question the late empress's choice and sensed a power struggle brewing.